In this video, we will be going through all the reactions of alkanes from the NCERT textbook. Let's go ahead with the first reaction. It's the substitution reaction, and substitution means, say for example, take methane for example. Methane means a carbon atom bonded with 4 hydrogen atoms. You are replacing one hydrogen atom with something else. So that kind of replacement of one atom with some other atom or another group of atoms is what you call substitution. So the first substitution reaction that you're learning is the halogenation reaction. Means that the reaction with a halogen like fluorine, chlorine, bromine or iodine. Here they have taken the example of chlorine. So methane plus Cl2. Think of it in a similar way like I had drawn that structure of methane here. So it is CH4 plus Cl2 will be chlorine single bond chlorine. This HCl is going to come out, and when that HCl comes out, this chlorine attaches itself with the carbon atom here. So you get the formation of CH3Cl, and this is the HCl which came out. This reaction has to happen in the presence of H nu, that is UV light or sunlight. That UV light or sunlight is helpful for breaking the chlorine bond, and it is only after the breaking of chlorine bond that the reaction can go ahead. We will be discussing the mechanism in detail, but before we do that, let's just check this entire set of reactions. So in the presence of H nu, that is UV light or sunlight, chlorine will break, and one chlorine will take away one hydrogen atom with it, forming HCl, and the other chlorine which was left over will combine with the carbon atom, forming CH3Cl, that is chloromethane. The reaction doesn't stop here, because if you look at this carbon atom, it still has 3 hydrogen atoms which it can give 2 chlorine atoms. So that CH3Cl further prefers to react with chlorine. So this is going to give you 2 chlorine atoms. This was ultimately Cl2. One chlorine will take away one hydrogen with it. It will form HCl, and the other chlorine is going to get attached with the carbon atom. So now this carbon already had one Cl atom along with it, and it will have one more Cl atom, that is this Cl atom attached with it. So it will now be written as C, Cl2 and H2. So it is CH2Cl2. You call it dichloromethane. Now this dichloromethane also has hydrogen atoms which can further be replaced. So that CH2Cl2 reacts further with chlorine. One chlorine takes hydrogen with it, forms HCl, and the leftover chlorine attaches with the carbon atom, and that will form C. Cl2 was already there. One additional chlorine atom will make it CCl3, and one hydrogen atom will be left. So this gives you CHCl3, which is trichloromethane. You call it chloroform also, and chloroform is CHCl3. Okay, that chloroform or trichloromethane can further react with Cl2, because still there is one hydrogen atom with the carbon atom here. So that Cl is going to take the hydrogen atom here, and the other Cl is going to attach with the carbon atom, and finally the reaction continues up to tetrachloromethane, and the HCl which came out has been written here. Okay, so this is up till where the reaction is going to go on, and yeah, that's the entire halogenation reaction. Now the thing you need to understand with the halogen reaction is the mechanism of it. Like I said, UV light is necessary for breaking the chlorine-chlorine bond. So this was a chlorine-chlorine single bond. This is Cl2 that we had taken. In the presence of sunlight, that is H nu, or even heating is okay. Either of them. Not both of them, either of them. So if there is sunlight, you don't need heating. If there is heating, you don't need sunlight. If both are then absolutely the reaction will take place. But it will take place even if one out of the two is present. So in the presence of sunlight or heating, the chlorine-chlorine bond is going to break, and it will break in a symmetrical manner. Symmetrical manner means the bond contains 2 electrons. After breaking, one electron will go with this chlorine, the other electron will go with this chlorine. So you will get chlorine free radical plus chlorine free radical. In short, we get the formation of 2 free radicals of chlorine. The free radical of chlorine attacks the hydrogen atom of methane. Methane is CH4. I am writing it as HCH3. This chlorine extracts the hydrogen atom from here. And when chlorine extracts hydrogen, the bond between hydrogen and carbon will also break symmetrically. That is, one electron will go to hydrogen, one electron will go to carbon. HCl attach with each other, and that forms the HCl. that was coming out and CH3 free radical is getting formed. That CH3 free radical has the ability of breaking another chlorine molecule. The chlorine molecule was getting broken by light. Now it is the methyl free radical which got generated, and that is what will break the chlorine free radical. So this will give you CH3Cl. Break the chlorine free radical means it will break the chlorine-chlorine bond. It will break the bond between the chlorine atoms in the molecule. So when you're breaking the bond here, each chlorine gets 1 electron and CH3 combines itself with the Cl here. So you get CH3Cl plus the chlorine free radical. What does the chlorine free radical do? Exactly what it was doing in the step here. That chlorine free radical will attack another H of methane. It will again form HCl and the methyl free radical. And the reaction keeps on continuing in this manner. So that's the mechanism of the reaction, and a few important points about this reaction that you need to know. Now see, it's not necessary that the chlorine free radical that got formed here is going to attack methane only. In the same very reaction, in the previous step only, if you check, there was a methyl chloride getting formed. So the chlorine free radical getting formed, instead of attacking methane, it has the ability of attacking methyl chloride also. So instead of methane, methyl chloride is CH3Cl. We can write that CH3Cl as H, CH2Cl. Now after chlorine attacks the methyl chloride molecule, it can take away hydrogen from there, forming HCl, and the free radical getting formed is of CH2Cl. The free radical is with carbon, so we will mark it here on the carbon atom, and that CH2Cl free radical can attack another Cl2Cl2 molecule. Not Cl2Cl2, another chlorine molecule, another Cl2 molecule. It can break the bond of chlorine, and by taking one chlorine along with it, it will form CH2Cl2, but it will in turn generate a chlorine free radical. This chlorine free radical, it has the ability of attacking the CH2Cl2 itself that is getting formed, and instead of CH2Cl2, if it wants to attack CH4, then also it can do so. If it wants to attack CH3Cl, then it can attack CH3Cl also. Basically, any of the species which has a replaceable hydrogen atom, Cl free radical can attack it. Okay, so that's the reason the reaction was proceeding up to the formation of CCl4. After CCl4 got formed, I'm talking about this. This is the reason that, because Cl free radical was able to attack every molecule having a hydrogen atom to offer, the reaction continued till CCl4, and CCl4 does not have any further hydrogens which can be replaced. That is why the reaction was stopping here. But up till CHCl3, because there was a hydrogen atom here, chlorine free radical was able to extract it, form HCl, and that is why the reaction was continuing up till this step. Okay, so that's one feature of the reaction. Also, you need to check that in the reaction mixture, when this reaction is when this reaction is happening, there is a formation of methyl free radicals in the second step itself. If there is a formation of methyl free radicals, there is a possibility of two methyl free radicals reacting with each other. That is, two methyl free radicals will combine with each other, and it will give rise to the formation of CH3, which is ethane. So in the reaction of chlorination of methane, there is a little bit of formation of ethane also which occurs, and this has experimentally been observed. So this is one more feature of the halogenation reaction, that in the halogenation of methane, that is in the chlorination of methane, you do get to see the formation of ethane as well, and that is precisely because of the formation of methyl radicals. They have a possibility of combining amongst themselves, forming ethane. Okay. So with that, we go ahead with the next reaction. Okay, not the next reaction. In fact, there's a little bit more spoken about this reaction in the textbook. Do read that paragraph, and in short, I'll just speak about it here. So it is seen that the rate of reaction is going to be fastest with fluorine, a little slower with chlorine, a little slower with bromine, and the slowest with iodine. This happens because fluorine is the most reactive halogen. In case if you have read it, then fine, fluorine is the most reactive halogen. You might have read that in inorganic chemistry, and even if you have not read that, then keep in mind this particular result for now. When you study inorganic chemistry, you will be going through this, or you will be reading this result once again, that amongst the halogens, fluorine is the most reactive. So the reaction is going to be quickest if it is fluorine, a little slower with chlorine, then bromine, then iodine will be the slowest. In fact, iodination is a very slow process and it is a reversible process. Yet, say for example, if I want to make this reaction occur with iodine, then what should we do? CH4 plus I2. It will give us CH3I and HI. But like I said, the reaction is reversible. So CH3I and HI will react with each other, giving back the reactants. But what if, say for example, the moment CH3I and HI are getting formed, what if we eliminate HI? If we eliminate HI, then there is no HI left over to react in the backward manner, and that is how we can stop the backward reaction and get a major CH3I from the reaction of these two compounds. So if you want CH3I from the reaction of these two compounds, you need to remove the HI, you need to eliminate HI the moment it is getting formed in the reaction, so that the backward reaction does not take place. To remove HI, we can make use of oxidizing agents like HiO3 and HNO3. That HiO3 will react with HI, forming I2 and H2O. So HI is getting eliminated with the help of this reaction, and because HI is getting eliminated, we are stopping the reverse reaction and letting the reaction stop at the formation of methyl iodide. So that is how we can make iodination occur. And yeah, that's an important point about this reaction, that halogenation will be fastest with fluorine and slowest with iodine. There's a little bit of discussion we have had about the reaction with iodine. And yeah, one last point regarding this reaction. The rate of hydrogen replacement will be maximum with tertiary, a little slower with secondary, and the slowest with primary. So if, say for example, I have CH3, CH, CH3, CH2, CH3. See, this carbon atom is attached only with one carbon atom, so we call it a primary carbon atom, that is a 1 degree carbon atom. This carbon atom is attached with one carbon atom here and one carbon atom here, so we call it a secondary, that is a 2 degree carbon atom. And this carbon atom is attached with 1, 2 and 3 carbon atoms, so we call it a tertiary, that is a 3 degree carbon atom. Now a tertiary carbon atom, the methyl groups do have an inductive effect, that is the phenomenon by which the alkyl groups are going to keep pushing electrons away from them. So this carbon atom has an electron pushing effect, that is the inductive effect, from three sides, that is it has a maximum pushing effect on it. And because it has a maximum pushing effect on it, we can think of it in this way, that this hydrogen is having a maximum push, and that is why this hydrogen can come out very easily, and that is why a tertiary hydrogen atom can be replaced in the most efficient, in the quickest of manners. And that is why the rate of replacement is maximum with a tertiary hydrogen atom. What happens with a secondary hydrogen atom? Let's check. So this was a tertiary carbon atom. The hydrogen atom with it is what we call a tertiary hydrogen atom. Here's a secondary carbon atom. The hydrogen atom with it is what we will call a secondary hydrogen atom. This carbon atom is facing a push, the inductive effect, only from 2 carbon atoms, which is lesser than 3 carbon atoms as compared to this. So because this carbon atom is having a push only from 2 carbon atoms, the hydrogen atom of this carbon atom can come out, but not as easily as a tertiary hydrogen atom. And in a similar way, if you talk of a primary carbon atom like this or this or this, then a primary carbon atom is going to face push only from one carbon atom. Compared to secondary, tertiary and primary, the primary carbon atom is having the least of pushes from the alkyl groups, and that is why the hydrogen atom of a primary carbon atom will come out in the most difficult way. The least efficient will be the primary hydrogen coming out. So ultimately this is another thing you should keep in mind, that the hydrogen atoms coming out, the ease of hydrogen atoms coming out will be easiest for tertiary, a little slower or a little difficult for secondary, and the most difficult and the slowest for a primary hydrogen atom. Okay, with that we go ahead with the next reaction, that is combustion. Combustion means you take any hydrocarbon like CXHY, we don't know how many carbon and how many hydrogen atoms. We are just taking a compound having some number of carbon and some number of hydrogen atoms, and we are making it react with excess of oxygen. Making a hydrocarbon react with excess of oxygen, of course at a high temperature, it's going to give rise to the formation of simply carbon dioxide and water. It is very easy to balance the reaction because initially all you need to do is balance the carbon and hydrogen atoms. There are X carbon atoms we have here. So on the right hand side we will write X moles of carbon dioxide. There are Y atoms of hydrogen. So here we already have H2O, and that is why we will write the coefficient here as Y by 2. Now calculate the number of oxygen atoms on the right. The number of oxygen atoms are 2x and plus Y by 2. So we can write the coefficient here as 2x plus Y by 2. But this is already O2. So the coefficient needs to be half of this. So we will have 2x divided by 2, which is simply x, and Y by 2 upon 2, which will be Y by 4. So the coefficient of O2 will be Y by 4. Do you need to memorize this formula? The answer is no. You just need to check what reaction you are writing and then accordingly balance it in the way we have balanced this particular reaction. So say for example I talk to you about let's call it butane. So C4H10. C4H10 on complete combustion, that is reaction with excess of oxygen, or you can also call it excess of air. At a high temperature, it's going to form carbon dioxide plus water. Keep in mind this is complete combustion, not a partial combustion. Partial combustion will be something else, but complete combustion, that is complete burning, is going to give you purely carbon dioxide and water. How many carbon atoms? 4. So we write a 4 here. How many hydrogen atoms? 10. There is H2O here, so we will write 5 H2O. Let's count the number of oxygen atoms. They are 8 and 5, which is 13. So the coefficient here will be 13 by 2. If you want, you can multiply the entire equation by 2 and say this is 2C4H10 plus 13O2 is equals to 8CO2 and 10H2O. But that step of multiplying with 2 is entirely up to you. This is how easily you can balance out the reaction, by balancing out first the carbon atoms and second the hydrogen atoms. Oxygen will be balanced in the last step by counting number of oxygen atoms on the right and taking an appropriate coefficient on the left hand side. Okay, so that's how you can write the combustion reaction. And like I said, combustion is the burning of any hydrocarbon with excess of oxygen or excess of air at a high temperature. That complete combustion will give you only and only carbon dioxide and water. Going ahead with the next reaction, that is controlled oxidation. Now see, from here on all the reactions are simply general knowledge type of reactions. You don't have to memorize them for JEE mains or any of the competitive exams. Most of these reactions are just factual kind of reactions, and there is not much of logic or much of results that you can learn from these reactions. They are given in the NCERT textbook, so we are definitely going through these reactions. Do not waste much of time in memorizing them because, like I said, there's no result or any logic that you are learning from these reactions. These are just factual reactions which you need to keep in mind as general facts. Okay, so like I said, don't waste much time in memorizing them. Instead, focus on reactions which are going to have more of logic and are some standard kind of results for answering questions in JEE mains and other competitive exams. Let's go ahead with this reaction. It's methane reacting with oxygen. You might think this is combustion, but it's only controlled oxidation. Controlled oxidation will not give you carbon dioxide and water. It will stop the reaction at a little earlier stage. That is, it will partially oxidize methane and convert it to methanol. Now, whether you get methanol or something else, that depends upon the catalyst which you are taking. The catalyst you have taken here is copper, and even the conditions matter. It is 523 Kelvin and a very high pressure of 100 atmospheres. In these conditions, methane and oxygen are combining to give you methanol. If the conditions and the catalysts are going to change, then methane and oxygen's reaction might give you something other than methanol. Okay, so only under these conditions, the reaction of methane and oxygen, that is partial oxidation of methane, will give you methanol. Do you need to memorize it for your college exams? Yes. And beyond your college examinations? Absolutely no. Don't waste time in memorizing all these things. Go ahead with the second reaction. Again, it's methane and oxygen, but this time you're changing the conditions. You're taking the catalyst as molybdenum oxide, that is MO2O3, and in the presence of heat. They have not mentioned what atmosphere, they have not mentioned what temperature and how many atmospheres pressure. They have just said heating. So methane and oxygen in these conditions is going to give you methanol, which is HCHO, or you can call it formaldehyde as well, and water. It's ethane on partial oxidation in the presence of CH3COO twice, Mn, and heating. It gives rise to the formation of ethanoic acid and liberates water. And there's a tertiary alkane here, and tertiary alkanes. Okay, they've said that ordinary alkanes are going to resist any kind of oxidation, but alkanes that have a tertiary hydrogen atom, they can be easily oxidized to the corresponding alcohols with potassium permanganate. Now that's an important thing you are reading here, that normal alkanes do not undergo oxidation, but if there is a tertiary hydrogen atom in the alkane, then it can undergo oxidation with alkaline KMnO4. Okay, they haven't said alkaline or acidic. We will just say it can undergo oxidation in the presence of KMnO4, and the oxidation will give rise to the formation of alcohol. Alcohol further does not get oxidized, yet if you carry out a very destructive oxidation of the alcohol that you have got, you will get the breaking of chains, and some or the other compounds will be obtained, which will definitely be smaller than the compound here, but currently we are not getting into it. For now, if the alkane has a tertiary hydrogen atom, then reaction with KMnO4 is going to give rise to the formation of alcohol. So CH3, CCH3, CH3, and a hydrogen atom was present here. This was the tertiary hydrogen atom because it is attached with a carbon atom that is tertiary in nature, and by oxidation with KMnO4, that hydrogen atom was being replaced with OH. So that's how you can oxidize an alkane having tertiary hydrogen atom to an alcohol. Okay, we go ahead with the next reaction. It's the isomerization reaction, and this reaction occurs with straight chain alkanes. So if you are making a straight chain alkane react in the presence of anhydrous AlCl3 and HCl, then what happens is, check this. This is N-hexane. Hexane means there are 6 carbon atoms. Take the terminal methyl group, and by taking the terminal methyl group, you can make it shift and attach it on the second carbon atom, or you can make it attach on the third carbon atom, anywhere but somewhere in the middle of the chain. So one possibility is eliminating the methyl group here and making it attach with the second carbon atom here, or the other possibility is making it attach with the third carbon atom from here, which is the third carbon atom from here also. So there are two different possible products which you can get. One possible product is with the methyl from the terminal position getting attached at the third carbon atom, and that compound has been written over here. You can name it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is 3-methyl pentane, and the other possibility was the case that I have written in green, that is this one. If that methyl group gets attached on the second carbon atom, then that case is shown over here. You can give a naming to that compound as this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the green compound that we have written can be named as 2-methyl pentane, because there are 5 carbon atoms in the main chain. So 2-methyl pentane and 3-methyl pentane are the two possible products in this particular reaction. Let me just repeat that. In this reaction, you are taking anhydrous AlCl3 and HCl, and what that anhydrous AlCl3 and HCl is doing is, from the alkane that you have taken, it took out a methyl group from the terminal position and made it attach on one of the intermediate positions, that is either the second or the third position. Okay, we go ahead with the next reaction, and here the reaction is aromatization. You're taking a six-membered ring. This six-membered ring, okay, it's not a ring actually, it's a six-membered alkane which is hexane, and that hexane is made to react with itself only, but in the presence of, or not made to react with itself, but it is heated at 773 Kelvin and at a pressure of 10 to 20 atmospheres in the presence of catalysts like chromium oxide or vanadium pentoxide or molybdenum oxide. In the presence of these catalysts and at a high temperature and pressure, this molecule, which is N-hexane, it undergoes cyclization, that is, it will form a cyclic product, and the cyclic product with 6 carbon atoms is benzene. So cyclization of N-hexane under these conditions is going to occur, giving rise to the formation of benzene. Of course, if you see, the reaction is not balanced because hexane is basically C6H14, CnH2n plus 2, and benzene is C6H6. So there are 8 hydrogen atoms which have not been accounted for. So those 8 hydrogen atoms can be written as plus H2 on the side of products, that is, you can write a plus H2 here. And how many H2? There were 8 hydrogen atoms, right? So we can write 4 H2. And yeah, that's how we are explaining this reaction, that is N-hexane will undergo cyclization in these kind of conditions, that is in the presence of a suitable catalyst and at a high temperature and pressure to form benzene and liberate hydrogen. What if we have an alkane having more than 6 carbon atoms? This reaction is a specialty of alkanes having more than 6 or 6 carbon atoms. You don't get this reaction with alkanes having 5 carbon atoms. So I get back to my question, what if we take an alkane having 7 carbon atoms? So if we take N-heptane, see, N-heptane will also undergo cyclization, but by undergoing cyclization, it will form benzene only. But you might end up asking me that benzene means a total of 6 carbon atoms. Where does the 7th carbon atom go? The 7th carbon atom comes on this carbon as a substitution of methyl, and you get the benzene, the methyl substituted benzene, and that compound is what you call toluene. So a 7 carbon atom compound, which is N-heptane, under the same conditions, that is a suitable catalyst and at high temperature and pressure, is going to undergo cyclization, and that is what is going to form toluene, and that will be a final product. The hydrogen atom needs to be balanced, and that balancing can be done by simply counting the number of hydrogen atoms here and here. So that balancing work is something I'm leaving up to you guys. So that's the aromatization, or you can even call it cyclization reaction. Okay, we go ahead with the next one. Yet another reaction. Like I said, you only have to read it because it's given in the NCERT textbook. Do not waste much time in memorizing these reactions because they are more of factual reactions and are not related to any kind of results or logic. Methane is going to react with steam. So here's methane. Steam means the vapor form of water, so that is why they have written H2O. Methane and steam are going to react in the presence of nickel catalyst and at a high temperature to form carbon dioxide and hydrogen. This hydrogen that you are getting is, or this method, let's just say this method is the industrial method for the preparation of hydrogen. So again, in presence of nickel catalyst, the reaction between methane and water giving rise to the formation of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. Let's go ahead with one last reaction, that is pyrolysis. If you are heating a large hydrocarbon, large means a hydrocarbon having more than 3 or 4 carbon atoms will be considered large. For this particular, only the pyrolysis section. So if you are taking a longer alkane, so this is a long alkane, and if you are heating it at a high temperature, the longer alkane will keep breaking into smaller and smaller alkanes. So if you talk of C6H14, which is N-hexane, okay, it might not be N-hexane, it might be something else. So, it can be isohexane or it can be any isomer of hexane. So let's call it only hexane for now. So if you are taking hexane and heating it at 773 Kelvin, you can get the formation of alkene by liberation of H2. How do I know this is alkene? It's because the compound satisfies the formula CnH2n. If N was 6, 2 2n is also, 2n will be 12. So C6H12, we are getting the formation of alkene by the liberation of hydrogen. There's the formation of four-membered compound also. Four-membered means 4 carbon atom compound and a 2 carbon atom compound. It might be alkane, alkene. That's not the point of discussion for now. The point is that a 6 carbon atom compound is breaking into smaller compounds having 4 and 2 carbon atoms. The same happens with this reaction. This thing is breaking into a 3 carbon atom, 2 carbon atom and 1 carbon atom compound. Basically, pyrolysis means you take a large hydrocarbon, and when you are heating it, it gets broken down to smaller hydrocarbons. You can't predict which hydrocarbon will give you this. You can't predict which hydrocarbon will give you which product, and also these are not reactions you need to memorize. Just read them once and you can go ahead with whatever the next reaction is going to come in the book. In fact, this is the last reaction. So just read this reaction and you will be done with the reactions of alkanes. If you are taking dodecane and heating it in the presence of platinum, palladium or nickel catalyst at 973 Kelvin, even that higher hydrocarbon, it's getting broken down to smaller hydrocarbons and other products. So there's no logic with which you are predicting the products. You just need to read them for your 11th standard college exams, memorize them. It will be just a matter of maybe 15-20 minutes to memorize them for college exams. Beyond that, it is absolutely fine if you don't waste any time in memorizing these factual type of equations. So yeah, that's where we are done with the reactions of alkanes. See you in the next video where I have discussed the methods of preparations of alkenes.